I really like to give tech talks, but more and more I've been thinking about our industry. I've been involved in our industry for 24 years, and I don't know, I wanted to, it's going to keep going because security is never going to go away as a problem, but I wanted to keep going because people get into it. And I wanted to come to this conference that John put on to try to, whether it's here with the audience or on a recorded message in the future, I guess, give people something to think about in terms of what does it mean? What does it all mean? So, if people are watching this or they came to a conference, then they're thinking, oh, I want to take that red pill. I want to get involved. I want to know more. And they're curious. Something inspired them along the way. Maybe it was just a movie, or maybe it's something that happened. But the reality is, as we have all come to know, those of us that are a little jaded or maybe stuck, is that everything around us is just a system of control, right? I mean, what if I told you that the world around you was, a veil to hide the truth from you? You've heard that one before, right? But it's a little bit true, and we don't think about it because we're so caught up in it. And our trick is, how do we do more or do something different? So you go down this rabbit hole, you know that there are threats lurking out in the shadows, you know that there are interesting, scary things to take down, and you want to get involved. You want to be that hero of your own story and maybe get involved professionally. So how do you do that? Well, you go up to somebody at a conference and you say, oh my gosh, look what you can do. Please teach me how to hack. And you sit on the sidelines and hope that that's what will come to fruition. That's often what happens. People get excited about the things that we as defenders repel all the time, and they're like, oh, I want to do that. And actually that's really cool because you're excited and you're engaged and you're curious at that point. But the reality is we're all very busy, and what happens when so often people come up and ask these kind of questions is they go, that's great, very cool that you want to do that. Go read a book or take this class and come back to me after you've read it. Which is actually, I can't say I disagree with that, because you need to show initiative, investment, and that you're serious before you start taking the time of the people that we're all under siege, and it's like a scene out of The Lord of the Rings, and we're defending this castle against a horde. That's how we feel all the time. So we don't have time for people who are whimsical, but if you show that you're serious and have some initiative, then we can teach you something. And I talk about hacking because it's an easy paradigm that people like to get engaged with, but really we're talking about any of the disciplines, because in cybersecurity there are so many things that you can study and learn. You just wear yourself out at doing it. If you think about, if any of you have ever seen, or if you haven't seen, the Northrop Grumman security fan is the proper name. It's the security rainbow that has something like 81 different things on it. Areas of security, cybersecurity, and layers of security: network security, application security, data security, EIEO, and then the elements within there. Those are also all the things that all the vendors want to sell you to, because they're all areas of concern. But nonetheless, there are things you need to learn, but you can't be. Well, it's really hard to be a master of all. So we get into specializations. And then you hopefully have a team, and if not a team, then lots of good tech, maybe some managed services, and dare I say it, artificial intelligence, whatnot, to bolster the rest. Because as we try to go off and be the heroes, we find more and more that there are hurdles, those systems of control, that we're so caught up in the moment we don't even see them. And what we slowly come to realize is that in an organization, when you get a paycheck for doing this stuff, in an immature organization, which I will say are most of them, until you actually have a structure and a team and all the things that the panel were talking about in terms of connectedness to the senior leadership, companies, appreciate IT when they make their laptop go again. And that's about as much respect as a lot of companies give IT. They really dislike security. Security does nothing for them except make them press buttons on their phone and put in more passwords and have to wait for this slow, virtual network of privateness thing or whatever. That's how they don't, that's how little they care to even understand the names or acronyms. And I don't blame them. They're there to do some other job. We're there to empower them. And so we want to get from being put in a corner to becoming involved in the organization. So what do? You're stuck with no resources or little resources, not a lot of support, even after you got kind of patted on the head by the senior security person, and then you go and get a job somehow, put you in a corner. Well, you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to go and take some kind of training. I'm going to read a book. Maybe if I'm lucky, they'll pay for a class I can take. Or if I'm self-motivated, I'll come to a conference and I'll network with people. I'll learn more things than I ever could have thought possible. And that's why people need to come in these conferences. You meet people, you share stories, war stories about challenges you're facing, how you overcame it. You can get engaged, whatnot. But nonetheless, you need to up your game if you're going to get anywhere, because you got into security for a reason. You could have, and I'm not putting down IT any, but IT, they do a job and they crank through it really well and they get into a rhythm and it's very repetitive. Security operations can be a little bit like that, but the reality is most of us that get into security are because we're excited about it. We want to go and do, cool things, whatever that becomes. So we take training and we go back to our boss and we say, hey, I learned all this great stuff and we can do more here. And this is this cycle of this is that system of control, a cycle. You are caught into the thinking of what it is they've allowed you to do. And you're trying to be innovative and inspiring a little bit by bringing some news that you're fed from folks like myself or people selling you something or peers. And some of it's great stuff, but nonetheless, your boss is like, I don't know what you mean. This is your job here. I sent you to a class. Thanks for letting me know. And, they don't offer you that much support. They just keep you in that system of control. And it's up to you to figure out a way out. Up to you to figure out how to, understand that in some constructs, rules can be bent or broken, right? So hopefully not too dispirited, you go back to your cube and you realize the whole world's against me, man. I get relegated to taking antivirus calls when the help desk doesn't want to deal with it. This is how cybersecurity careers can begin and fizzle out and die. And it's up to you to do something more with it. And so I'm going to say this more than once. I'm going to encourage you to get involved with communities. And whether it's LinkedIn or at conferences or local ISACA, whatever, find groups. Or, hey, I hear this thing, some 2,600. Yeah, anything that you can get. Because otherwise you're just going to have a dead-end career. And this applies not just to junior, 1-year, 2-year people. You could be 5-6 years into your career and you're still sitting in your cube drinking the Kool-Aid that the boss fed you. So I would suggest you never stop training, do more, up your kung fu. And again, I started talking about pen testing, but what about reverse engineering malware? What about well, I mean, what about compliance? I mean, that's something that, going back to what the panel was talking about, legal gets behind all day long, and it's not sexy, but it's a source of authority that says thou shalt. And then you can take that messaging and say, not only is this the best practice of the wisdom of our elders that came before us, some of it's better than other guidance, but nonetheless, it's a measure of reasonable security controls. If you were to look at what's happened this year, this August, with the privacy, well, I'm from California, so the privacy law in California that's being morphed is such that for privacy issues or data privacy breaches, there is now a component to that law that's been added that it looks at your security controls and did they measure the standard of reasonable security. And in our state, because of State Attorney General, that means the Center for Internet Security, critical security controls, those 20 controls. So it becomes this measurement of this is how high you have to be to ride the ride. And if you don't do that in cybersecurity, now you've opened yourself up to liability. So that's a real long-winded way of saying that even GRC matters. You know, it's not just checking the box or whatever, you know, whatever Chris, you know, gets taken care of at his company, but it's a way to get engagement from leadership. And there's so many aspects. Again, I said 81 areas of concern, so you know you can pick your own popcorn. So anyway, you go and train, you look, you somehow convince them to give you more security tools and that you can just install, and what happens then is you start to see more, right? We put in more tools. I agree with Chris. I think less is more. I think my strategy is to have very strong fundamentals and then buy exotic stuff to cover the gaps, get to 80% with actually doing things well, configuration, architecture, all in security, having good situational awareness, know what you have to defend. That's all basic stuff. It doesn't cost a lot of money. So that for all of us, that should not really be a budget issue. There are even free tools out there you can go if you got to do that. But it takes that hacker mindset, that curiosity, that self-drive to do that. But when they finally listen to you and they buy you toys, you know, you can go ahead and put in the toys. But the reality is that the more you invest in your environment, the more you'll see. And as you become more and more aware, you'll become aware of, oh my gosh, there are things happening that I didn't know about. That connection, what's that all about? These people are coming left and right. And you can start to see the adversaries coming out of the woodworks, you know. So you start playing this game of block and tackle and offensive, defensive security. Again, I'll say that the first problem is your own organization. Your users, they just want to do their job. So they resist passively sometimes. They quietly quit security, as it were. You've got IT who might resent you, might be afraid of you. They might be concerned that you'll take their power, literally, because separation of duties. Maybe accounts are managed or ultimately controlled other than password resets by security, because IAM programs, right? So you get that kind of pushback, and then the business that doesn't understand. And then, oh, by the way, there's actually cyber threats that hit your business. So the more and more you figure out, okay, this is a real problem. We really have a lot of work to do, and you get more frustrated because you have to go back to your boss, and he's like, "You want what?" That's my impersonation of the guy. Anyway. So you kind of constantly go back into this, I'm going to be that as you advance, you become more and more self-propelling, and that's great, but you end up in these cycles that like you've almost been there or done something before. So you find yourself, well, let's go back and do more training. This training is the OSCP, by the way. That's the student. Anyway, so you try harder, and what you're not realizing as I tell the story is that you've trapped yourself into this little box, the only box they've allowed you to be in, until you can start to break through with all of the things that the other speakers have been talking about today, which is communication and engagement, engagement within your own organization, as well as engagement with the community at large, so that you can find new ways, tactics, techniques, and protocols of your own to break through into your own organization and make more of an impact. And while I've been using the hacker paradigm, I'll say again, we've been talking to some CISOs today. I'm a sitting CISO, but I think every person who's talked up here has been through it. And they've walked this journey, and we're here to share these ideas, tips, tricks, must-dos. And, how do you break through? You can go ahead and keep in this cycle, and you just get better security tools, hit harder against the bad guys, deal with new and impressive threats, figure out that you have scarier and scarier AI-based adversaries because threat services are up. They're using AI against us too. So it's this never-ending war that you have to navigate as the security practitioner, whether you're the one person in your organization, or you're a part of a team as an individual contributor, or a team lead, or you're a management individual, whatever it is. If you're sitting in a cube just doing the thing, well, that's okay. It's a job and it's honorable money, but really, it's up to us to think outside the box. It's up to us to push the envelope in our company. The scariest adversary you'll probably come up with against that has been mentioned here on the stage is the board. If you ever get to talk to the board, and hopefully it's not in that scenario Bruce talked about, which is, why am I meeting you for the first time and we're having an incident? But if you don't learn how to talk to the board, they will say, that's okay, that's very nice, have a cookie, go away. And it's not really going to be helpful. So these skills, these strategies matter. Building bridges with all those adversaries, which include how do you make the IT team your ally? How do you show to the users that you are making them successful? I've been at my current organization for just over a year, and it's been my mission to do outreach to the different department heads to ask them, well, so tell me about your job. What is it that you do in your day? Oh, and you do that with that, and this, and however, with your process? Okay, that's great. I really appreciate you telling me this stuff, because now when I implement security to keep this place safe, I will take into account what you need to do. I will make sure that you're accounted for. You matter, and I build those relationships that way. The more you become responsible for this security culture shift, the more you realize you have to. It is all about relationships at the end of the day, so they don't subvert your controls. But nonetheless, I talked about engagement, but what you really need is a mentor. You need direct relationships with people that are your peers in whatever role you are, whatever role you aspire to be. I sit on some advisory boards, and I'm taking coaching for board stuff because I want to be the best person I can. You have to be a lifelong student. Anyway, the more you get involved with the dialogue, you start to see things differently. You start to have paradigm shifts. You start to understand that there's a lot more out there than this box that they've put you in all your career, as long as you let them. So you want to punch in, punch out, have a job that, security never sleeps, so we get called on at random times. But that aside, if you're just there to do a job and go home, that's all right. But I think most people in security actually wanted to do more, wanted to do better, wanted to do the cool stuff in whatever form that means, and be that hero for the organization. So I'd first say, no matter how good you think you are, never stop being a lifelong learner, never stop being engaged, never stop coming to these conferences, and do promote these conferences, because you will have experiences and build relationships at a conference you won't get anywhere else. You know, they say your first job comes through submitting a resume, and every other job in your career comes through a relationship you build, and you'll build a lot more relationships coming to things like this. And I know our industry is in high demand, and it's pretty easy to get a job, but if you want to get the better jobs, build relationships. So you can either be a battery, and succumb to the controls that you probably didn't even think about were there, because you're just doing what they allow you to do and just trying to push those envelopes. I mean, heck, learn something new, break out, change jobs, be a consultant, go work for a VAR maybe, go work for a security manufacturer, change your roles. There's lots of those jobs out there, and see things differently, And then when you want to go back to an internal role, they'll say, oh my gosh, you have all this experience. And because that kind of experience isn't dog years, you just have to recognize that some of that's the dark side, where if you're at a bad organization, then you're nothing more than a sales number generator to them and not a person. So I'd caution you there. My objective in having a talk today, because I care about community, is to try to drive engagement. Like I said, I like tech talks. Last one I talked about supply chain security it was a ransomware talk. But anyway, I like those talks, but we need to work together as a community, and so I wanted to come here in the hopes that this will reach people and today and through the recording to say, let me think about my career differently. Let me be the protagonist that changes how the story is written. And if they can do that for anybody and inspire anybody, then that was success in my book. So that's my talk. I would say, go forth and do good. And if anybody wants to talk shop, or because you came to the conference and didn't watch this on video later, then we can give direct advice. All the people who have been on these stages are great resources. Thank you for your time and attention.